views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up, the debate of voter fraud and voter suppression surrounded the 2018 midterm elections. Democrats say Republicans are making it harder for people to vote, especially blacks and other minority groups. On the other hand, Republicans are saying that Democrats are allowing ineligible and illegal voters to cast their ballots. Which one is true? Well, or is there some truth to both sides? Stay with us, because coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we'll have that plus much more, as well as the take on the results of midterm 2018 with Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective?
Recounts, reclaims of voter fraud, claims of voter suppression, the midterm elections of 2018. Well, we're talking about that on this edition of Perspectives. I'm Daren Jaime, and thank you for joining us. Of course, we invite you to stay connected to us here on Perspectives. You can watch Perspectives every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67. If you have Verizon Fios, of course, that would be Channel 33, or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. And, of course, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, my professional page, Daren C. Jaime. On Facebook, you can get some inspiration there and some words of a different sort. But coming up on this edition of Perspectives, yes, we are talking about the midterm elections of 2018. They weren't short of drama in some contentious states around the country. As of the time that we're on the air today, I want you to know there's still recounts going on. Our guest today, no stranger to any of these election controversies. In fact, she was working tirelessly for months to help prevent voter suppression and help ensure citizens were able to successfully cast their votes. We welcome now Ms. Joyce Johnson back to Perspectives, and good to have you.
Thank you, thank you. It's been an interesting couple of months.
An interesting couple of months, interesting couple of weeks. Before we get into the
Yeah.
voter suppression, let's talk about the final results as we know them.
Yeah, as
of
we
the
know,
time
as
go on
we
the air
know
right
them,
now.
as we know them.
As we know them right now, going on the air. Of course, we do know the Democrats did successfully take the House,
Yep.
commanding lead in the House.
Yes.
When it comes to the Senate, Republicans, GOP were able to win the Senate. Here in the state, New York State won, Democrats won the Senate as well as the
That's
Assembly.
right.
That's pretty big. But let's talk on the national front, particularly when it comes to the issue of the Democrats winning the House and what that pretty much means. Your take on midterm 2018.
Well, happy. You know, we have the American public and our whatever have a unique capacity to right-size ourselves. We went into hopes with Trump in 2016. So many people not sure about Hillary. So, and actually, you know, she got more of the popular vote. So is the Electoral College president that he is. And then we've seen in the 2 years, and where he has so successfully or unsuccessfully rather, set about to divide the country on racial issues, very much bigoted, on class issues, everything that you can think of. And misogyny, and you know, how he is disrespected, how he is disrupted every norm of decency that's not political, but just what I call the American way. Mm-hmm. And I think the voters said on last Tuesday, the 6th, resoundingly, we are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they made massive changes. And so I am happy about that. I believe in a divided government. One side believes one thing, and so they castigate everyone else and say, no, we're not going to give you any voice in this government, as the Republicans have done. We might have a tendency to do the same thing when we have both this House and our Senate. The American people are saying, we want you all to work together, and maybe we enforce that divide by having one house in one hand and the other house in the other. And you're going to have to work together, or else in 2 years and then 4 years after that, every 2 years, we're going to fire some folks. And so that's the message to me. And I'm glad that we, the American public, the voting public, and you know, you and I have talked so many times about, you know, we're hearing, well, my vote doesn't matter. If there's ever a time in American history that folks understand that their vote does matter, it was this last election where 110 million people voted. And I credit much of that to Donald Trump and his presidency, his failed presidency, and the fact that folks are saying, well, I don't know what I can do, but I know one thing I can do is go and vote.
Well, you saw a lot of voting. You hear in states of Georgia, Florida.
Yes.
We've got recounts that are going on.
Yes, yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about this because one of the things that have gone on, particularly let's go right down to Georgia
and
where
Florida.
Where you've got Stacey Abrams in her race for governor against Secretary of State Kemp, who just gave up his Secretary of State spot. The person who's certifying the elections.
Certifying elections, and the person who has purged over since 2012 1.4 million people from the rolls, disproportionately African Americans. The person that also, you know, put into question the 53,000 folks, 70% of which are African Americans, you know, from this exact match. If I put Joyce S. Johnson or Joyce Johnson, you know, something is wrong with that, and I'm not eligible to vote. So what I have come to believe that the architects of a lot of this voter suppression are those folks and those elected offices, secretaries of state, most of us don't pay attention to. And Kemp is a prime example. He is the poster secretary of state for voter suppression. And he's been doing this for some time under the radar, and it comes home to roost in an election that's now questionable. And the fact that for the first time folks are saying, well, on election day, President Trump as well. On election day, Tuesday, whatever hasn't been counted doesn't matter. That's when, you know, we decide who is elected. As we're all now saying, if I went to the polls, and voted that day within the 6 to 9 or 6 to 7 or whatever it is, my vote must be counted.
But the reality is votes aren't counted on election day.
Exactly. They begin.
That's a false statement.
Yeah, that is. They begin at 9 o'clock. They start to, and as we know, with so many people in so many states, more people now do in states that don't have just you vote people start voting. Voting early voting, provisional ballots, absentee ballots. These are all folks who exercise their right in a number of forms. And it does take some time to count every last one.
What are we looking at in terms of, as of right now, for Florida and Georgia? How long do you think before we get a determination there?
I guess within the week. Mm-hmm. Within the week. I think Florida, they've given them till, is it this Friday or Tuesday? I'm not sure, because it seems to shift. And you're shifting by, folks going to the judicial process and judges saying, no, we're going to extend this. But the bottom line is every vote must be counted. Every vote must be counted. Let's take a quick break. Be back with more with Joyce Johnson. Coming up, we're going to talk about this issue, voter fraud, voter suppression. One side says voter fraud. The other side says voter suppression. Which one is true? We'll talk about that right after this.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made this vacation happen.
Double points with every purchase?
Cleverly merging promotions.
Love it.
Cross-referencing travel sites. And booking all your flights with those...
Vouchers. I got us bumped.
They were like, oh. But now they're like... Aloha. You aced this vacation. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
And I can't change
our neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund breeding.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
On Perspectives, and we bring you the latest information talking about midterm election 2018. And as we talked a little bit about this, the president made some comments in regards to voters and voter IDs, because on one side you've got people talking about huge voter fraud, and that's the GOP. On the other side, you've got Democrats who are saying it's not voter fraud, it's about voter suppression. And so which side is actually true? But I want to let you know the president actually weighed in on this, and I want to show you the comment that he made. As you know, he always takes to Twitter, and so we're going to tell you the tweet that the president actually said when it comes to having voter ID, and we'll throw that up there right now so that we can take a look and see what it is. He says, now, as Americans, you need identification, sometimes in a very strong and accurate form for almost everything you do, except when it comes to the most important thing, voting for the people that run your country. Push harder for voter identification. And so, as you can see, the president is making a strong case for voter fraud, and then Democrats on the other side are talking about voter suppression. Joyce, you weigh in on this. I know you're working very hard and very closely with people in regards to voter suppression.
And yes, I'm the National Partnership Director for an organization called VoteRiders.org. And it's our position that it's not the worst thing in the world to have ID. If there's, but it's strict ID and IDs that people can't get, and who are those people that might not be able to get them? The issue of voter fraud, that's a manufactured issue that has not been. There's been multiple studies. I mean, the Democrats, progressives, conservatives, or whatever that know massive voter fraud. As the president is indicating, he would make us believe that all black and brown folks are creating, are ineligible. These are folks who are not Americans and, illegal aliens and all of these kinds of things. I mean, his hysteria has made this go to a level that is really preposterous, not voter fraud. There's nothing wrong with acceptable voter ID, but it's the motive behind it. And the motive behind this movement, I'm not, we have Social Security numbers, we have whatever, we have driver's license and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it is targeted to specific populations disproportionately, then it raises the question of, do you really want everybody to vote, or do you want to cull out a population that might not be favorable for you? And where are those? And there have been voter ID laws enacted since 2010. Majority of those laws have been enacted in states with Republican governors and Republican state houses, and also Republican Secretary of States. And they have been targeted towards people of color, Latinos, elderly.
While we're talking, let me go to the map here. Let me throw the map up so that way people can take a look and see a little bit about voter ID laws and what you're talking about when it comes to states with voter ID laws. And so, as you see in the red, talking about places where voter ID is required. You're talking about states such as Georgia, Virginia, Indiana, Wisconsin, Kansas, Texas, North Dakota. Now, places where ID is requested but not required, that's what you see in the yellow, and there are states such as Washington, Idaho, Montana, Utah, Colorado, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Michigan, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, and Kentucky. But as we said, the states in the red where are predominantly Republican-held states, and it's no pun intended that it just happened to be red, right? It's no pun intended. But you look and you see Texas, Mississippi, and the state in the balance right now, Georgia, that we're talking about, where that's necessary.
Right.
In Florida, where the recount is going on right now, ID is requested but not required. Now, for us here in New York, you're taking a look and you see that's the white, and we would fall under the category of no document that's actually required.
And look at those states.
Yeah. And there's a few of them, and it's a lot across the northeastern seaboard where you would see predominantly no document required. But when we look at this right here, what we're actually seeing
is the southern states, Republican held. Generally the state houses, is maybe changing. State houses, senators, and governors. Mm-hmm. And really, who started this was Indiana. When Mike Pence was governor. Mm-hmm. So I say it has been Republican led, and again the voter ID is one piece of it, and then there is the suppressive vote going back to the secretaries of state. When you close in Dodge City, Kansas, where the majority, I was surprised, where the majority of the population are Latino now. There was one polling site because the population is only 17,000. They moved that polling site a mile or 2 miles outside of town, outside of the town, mm-hmm. with no transportation possible. We know, what do you mean no transportation? No subways, no buses, nothing. So those predominantly Latinos who may or may not, have cars, everybody lives in Dodge City, can no longer vote.
And you're talking about walking.
Oh, yeah,
if you're walking, you're talking about 40 blocks.
Yeah,
40 city blocks.
Yeah,
New York City blocks,
exactly. All to vote for what purpose? For what purpose? You look in Georgia, there was a county, I forget, I think it was Forsyth County, where the Secretary of State, who was also running for governor, closed a majority of the polling sites in that county with a population 70% African American, and so these are the suppression motives and tactics, where you have early voting, starting to move polling sites, closing them in predominantly minority neighborhoods or districts and whatever. That is to suppress. That is to suppress a vote. And the overall idea of you better have an ID or else. So if folks don't know what that ID is, it could be simply a military card which you might have. It could be all of those things, but if they don't know, I'm not going to go. My polling site's around the block. I'm not going to get in my car and drive 15 minutes to my polling site or whatever if I don't know what voter ID is required. I'm going to stay home.
GOP says that there's voter fraud in some states. Agree, disagree?
Disagree. Oh, no. Prove it. They say it. Prove it. There's not been proof yet. If it is, say it. Like we know now, the Russians have infiltrated our systems. The GOP is denying it, but every authorized person or people who've studied it and examined it and checked it out said no. Then prove it.
Well, you heard it here. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. More with Joyce Johnson. We'll return in a few. Back here, continuing our conversation with Joyce Johnson. And let me ask the question, because a lot of people ask this. Well, who administers the laws for voting practices in particular states?
The recommendation, the secretaries of state. The secretaries of state. These are one of these positions, and it's the same here. I don't know whether we have where it stands in New York State, but a majority of the states is Secretary of State. Nina Turner, who everybody knows from Bernie Sanders' campaign, 5 years ago she ran for Secretary of State of Ohio, and I met her in an organization that promotes women's political empowerment. We endorsed her. I'm saying, why would she run for something like Secretary of State? What is that? Fast forward, she was a forerunner, because she says these folks have power. And you know how it went in one ear and came out the other? But now, as I've seen the laws enacted, the practices, the administration of it, who can control where the polling sites are, the kinds of machinery, like in Georgia, in the Atlanta proper area, the historically black colleges, Clark, Morehouse, and Spelman, there were lines, crazy lines, and not enough machines. When blocks away there was a warehouse with brand new machines. The person who decides all of that is the Secretary of State. That's a suppressive, am I going to stand on line for 4 hours where, in some other county, you go in and out with a new machine, plenty of machines for whatever the population might be, you're in and out. Mm-hmm. That is suppression. Suppression means I'm tired, I'm going to get off the line. I mean, we have not come to be where I have to stand in line 12 hours. That's an exaggeration, but means to make it more difficult for you to stay online, to get there, or the time and all of that. That is to suppress, and it's targeted at particularly communities of color, the folks with disabilities. Now, seniors, a lot of seniors say, well, where's your driver's license? People give up their driver's license. And if a driver's license is a requirement, then you've got to go and get an ID where you never had before. So there are all of these mechanical things that have been put in place, but the architects of voter suppression, secretaries of state. Every friend out there listening, if you live around the country, Daren, I think you should run for Secretary of State if we have one here in New York. Protect the vote.
It's a huge thing. So where do we see this? We talked about New York. Let's talk more specifically about New York. They've got a Democratic Senate, Democratic Assembly coming up in 2019, Democratic governor.
Right.
When we talk about voting laws, the question about early voting, and why New York has not engaged in early voting.
I mean, we talk about the South. I mean, we talk about, early voting. We talk about, extended provisional, all of this. And we are the most regressive in my mind. So there is supposedly an opportunity. We have both houses and, like you said, the governorship. So what I want to look for, and some states are starting to think about the idea the same way we have to get a Social Security card at birth now. So when you get 18, in my mind, you should automatically be registered to vote. And then the choice is then, do you want to vote or will you vote? And that's our job, to educate and say, yes, you do, and yes, you must. But so here in New York, registration for everyone who turns 18, also education throughout, K through 12, that lets you know that is your constitution, it's your duty, civic duty, to participate in the electoral process. It is in your interest as a person who lives here and whatever. And also early voting. And because I know so many people over the years as a Democratic district leader and all, there's so many folks who go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and they are not out at 9 o'clock. Or for a host of reasons, that one-shot deal no longer works. In New York, you either there that one day from 6 to 9, or else, sorry, maybe the next election, you'll have the time to do it. You won't be working so hard. Your boss might give you off or whatever. And so we've got a lot of work to do here.
A lot of work.
We're not as progressive as we say.
Not as progressive as we say. What are the biggest challenges you feel going into 2020? Because as you talk about this, you've got the whole voter issue going on, right? But let's look at the presidency. Democrats have won the House. They've won pretty much in a blue wave is now can be
It
declared,
is,
right?
yeah.
The question remains, is there enough of a blue wave to come across in 2020, given the fact that you just can't be anti-Trump and win?
No, you can't. And I'm glad you said it, because I don't want to call it a blue wave. I'll say the righteous wave, because there are many folks in there who were Republicans and voted for Trump, and maybe voted for Republicans all the while, who voted against Republicans this time. That's the point I made about we can right-size ourselves. You know, the ideologues are this and that. The majority of people, I think, want good government. And so what I hope we don't do is overplay our hand. Overplay our hand is mean and the spirit is whatever. And we do, you know, opposition administration. The American people want problems solved, and if we don't first position ourselves first and foremost that way, we're going to lose. We're going to lose. We may not take back the presidency. So we've got work to do.
Yeah, a lot of work to do. That's why we bring you in, to discuss the work that needs to get done. You ought to run. You have run.
I have run.
Run again. That's it. Joyce Johnson, our guest. Thank you so much for being here
Always
again.
a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Joyce Johnson, our guest in the studio, talking about voter suppression. But listen, one thing can honestly be said. There were more people that actually turned out to the polls than ever before when it comes to midterm election. So when we talk about what worked, what didn't work, the one thing that did work was getting out to vote. Voting is a right. Voting is something that somebody died for, many people died for, were beaten for, and it's just a right, and as Joyce just said, lynched for. It's a right that many of us have exercised. And so the voting has gone on. The count is still going on. We're going to wait and see. We're going to update you more on what those final results are in Florida and Georgia. As we said, Democrats continue to take more of the House, haven't gained not much ground in the Senate, but we'll see what happens. The GOP, one side, Democrats on the other. The conflict continues. Yeah. That's about it for us here on Perspectives. I'm Daren Jaime. Take care. God bless. Till next time we meet, stay safe. Share your perspective with somebody else. It just might make a difference in someone else's life. Take care.
This is good. It's very good.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment.